I had seen Noel before a long time ago when I was on a mission to watch every Robin Williams film, a challenge that I suggest everybody does if you're a Robin Williams fan, because he's had some amazing films, some really hidden gems as well, some lesser known films. Unfortunately, I don't think Noel is a hidden gem. I can't remember how I felt about it the first time I watched it. I feel like I liked it more than I did this time, but maybe I was just looking at it as I was watching a Robin Williams fan, trying to be a little bit less biased because I do love him. I have to say, it's not a good film. I think they took the wrong approach with it. Then I will explain what I mean by that, but I won't go into any real spoilers just in case you do decide to watch it. This was released in 2004. It's directed by Chazz Palminteri, written by David Hubbard, and we have a cast including, of course, Robin Williams. We have Susan Sarandon, Penelope Cruz, Paul Walker. We have some really solid people in the cast, some really great performances, and I will say the characters are generally reasonably well written. I don't have a problem with the characters, obviously don't have a problem with the cast, and the narrative itself is where it lets itself down. We have various people on Christmas Eve going through various problems, and the film gives them the opportunity to reassess their situation, or they might meet another character who shows them a different perspective. They all have their own stories happening, and in itself, I don't hate it. In general, I'm not a fan of the films where we have people who are not connected in any way, but somehow they are, their stories intertwine. I just think they're very poorly written for the most part. I think it's very difficult to get that story done right, and unfortunately, this is not an example of it done right. And I think the reason for that, or for me the reason for that, is because we're just constantly jumping around between the characters. So I never really felt like we had enough time to get to know those characters. The only real character I liked, I mean, Robin Williams was good, but he wasn't in it a lot. But Susan Sarandon's character, Rose, I feel like we started to scratch the surface of building an emotional connection with that character. But as soon as I felt like I was starting to kind of care more deeply for that character, would be thrown into another character's story and then thrown to another one, and then we'd come back to Rose and then we'd leave Rose. And it's not to say that that absolutely cannot work as a narrative structure, but in my opinion it rarely does. And I think they could have told the same stories if they'd taken a different approach. And maybe this is personal preference, but I think it would have been better if they'd spent, I don't know how much time they spend on each story, but let's say hypothetically they spend 15-20 minutes telling Rose's story, and then they concluded Rose's story, and then somehow she met the character from the next story. So they could still be connected. They could still say, look at all of these people on Christmas Eve, not really connected, but living in the same space. I don't mean the same house, but obviously I mean the same city, the same town, wherever. And then we could have that person's story for 15-20 minutes. And then at the end of their story, they could be in a situation that could lead us into the next story. And then I wouldn't have felt like I was being thrown around too much. I would have felt like we had more time with the characters to build up a connection with them. So they could have told the exact same stories, but if they'd taken a different approach to the narrative structure, it could have actually been a decent experience. I still wouldn't have loved it based on personal preference. I just generally don't care for films where we have many little stories that are somehow connected. I find them to be really, really boring most of the time. But the stories themselves are not that interesting here either. Rosa's story is really the only one I cared about. The rest of them I just thought were a little bit dull, not that interesting. So that was another reason why it didn't work for me. And the Christmas aspect, yes, it does feel like a Christmas film. There is enough Christmas in this that I'm absolutely fine with it being marketed as a Christmas film. And I say that because there are plenty of so-called Christmas films where there's not so much as a bit of tinsel. This one definitely feels like it's set around Christmas, so credit where it's due. They got that right. But it's also just depressing. It's not a heartwarming Christmas film. That's not to say there aren't positive moments or that characters don't have moments where they're feeling uplifted. But it just, for a viewer, feels really, really depressing. And not in a way where it's moving and inspirational. It's just dull and negative and not a fuzzy, happy Christmas experience. And even the moments that seem like they're meant to be uplifting were just really bland. So I don't think the narrative has a lot to offer. Had they changed the narrative structure, I think it might have been a slightly better experience and maybe could have been more emotional. Because as I said, whenever I felt like I was starting to develop an emotional connection to Rose specifically, we were then thrown into another character as part of the narrative and the kind of lost momentum there. It could have been good. I don't think it ever could have been great. Obviously, I loved seeing Robin Williams in this, but it's not a good film. Do I recommend it? Only if there's a very, very specific reason why you want to see this. For example, you're a fan of somebody in the cast. I guess it's borderline watchable, but beyond that, there's not a lot I can say. The technical aspects are fine. Visually, it's fine. The camera works fine. Lighting, absolutely no problems with any of that. So technically, I guess it's not a bad film apart from the editing of the structure of the narrative. The characters are reasonably well written, but I felt like we were being thrown around too much, and I never really got the chance to connect with them. And since I felt like I was connecting with them, that was just thrown away once we were forced into a different part of the narrative. So it's not a good film. It could have been a good film if they'd taken a different approach. But that being said, if you're curious, if you're interested in any of the cast, check it out. But from my perspective, I don't think it'll be a particularly great experience.